Okay, I'm putting up. I hope everyone is contributing to David's buying him a cup of coffee to keep this going. I'm gonna also put up one of mine for my Zoom course. I've just come up with the things that I run. Obviously, just like David's, it's not required. It's just something that I'd like. Uh, has it ever been this bad before? My four grandparents, not knowing each other, all came from Ireland during a famine. Had it ever been this bad before? They came to America and experienced the Great War, the killer flu, while my father grew up. Had it ever been this bad before? My parents grew up during the Great Depression and experienced a terrible World War II. Had it ever been this bad before? I grew up and my parents experienced another worse World War II on two continents, even more killed, the start of the atomic age. Had it ever been this bad before? I grew older and my mother experienced the death of her husband, the Korean War, the Cold War. Had it ever been this bad before? I grew up and experienced the Bay of Pigs, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the assassination of a president and other heroes, the Vietnam War and the death of friends' brothers, rioting in the streets, the widespread use of narcotics. Have it been this bad before? Now my grown children have experienced the worst polarization in our country since the Civil War, the return of the Cold War, an insurrection over a over a presidential election, the loss of life from the invasion of the Ukraine, a real threat of nuclear war. Had ever been this bad before? The question really is not, had ever been this bad before, but can it get even worse? And will it? A shorter one on kind of the same theme. The greatest challenges. Franklin Roosevelt never lived to see the end of the Cold War. John F. Kennedy never lived to see the civil rights legislation. Lyndon Johnson never lived to see the end of the Vietnam War. Ronald Reagan never lived to see the end and the return of the Cold War. Who, if any of us, will live to see the end of the present Cold War? And on a slightly different light, the cold. Have you ever noticed that two of the most common expressions about the cold? Cold as a witch's tit, freeze the balls off the brass monkey, deal with private body parts. Maybe the fucking cold is really an excuse to stay in the house and do just that. Thank you very much for putting up with me.